Has birth control ruined society? That's a genuine question from me. I had an idea for talking about this subject because I was watching a podcast debate type of thing, and one of the people that was on there said abortion's the number one issue, and that's really where they get a lot of their political affiliation from. That's what they're looking at. And I sort of thinking about abortion, I think, well, how does abortion happen? Right? Is when you have a kid, right? How do you stop having kids? Through contraception and birth control. And then I thought about, well, what if we got rid of contraception? Not only was abortion illegal, but you could not take the pill, so that you could not prevent yourself from getting pregnant if you were having sex. How would that shape the relationships that we have? Because I think a lot of it is about relationships. Abortion, these issues, contraception, it changes the way that you approach relationships and sex. And intimate relationships usually involve sex, right? So I would ask the question to someone, a lady, I would say, if you had 100% chance, and the guys, if you had 100% chance that the person that you were sleeping with right now, you were going to have a baby with them, would you continue having sex? Would you continue to go out and sleep with people if you knew that every single time you did, there was 100% chance that you were going to have sex? Well, we know it's not 100%, but that would change your interactions, wouldn't it? Now, let's just take that from 100% to who knows? Well, I don't know what the exact percentages are, but let's just say it's a lot more than zero. Okay, there was a chance because you don't know. They're not on a birth control pill. Would that change your decision making? Would that change if you were going to drink alcohol? Because, hey, alcohol and drugs, they might lower inhibitions and they might get you to do things that you normally wouldn't. If you do drink, would you get drunk so that you maybe black out and you don't know who you slept with? I've been there before. Would you think more about the people that you would start a relationship with? Because you'd think to yourself, well, if there's a chance that I'm going to have a kid with this person, do I really want to be by their side and rear this child together? I think those questions and the answers to those questions dictate a lot of what's going on in society. And you might say, JD, what are you talking about? It's sex and you should be able to have sex. And I go, look, I'm one of these people that has done a lot of debauchery, all right? Pleasure and sex. And so I know what's on that side of things. I know where that leads. And this is just my personal opinion through my experience, I don't think that that's good for society. So getting back to my question, is it ruining society? Is the birth control pill, is contraception ruining society? I look at my own life and I look at the decisions that I've made and the actions that I've taken, and I look at it and I go, if there was a much higher percentage of me getting a girl pregnant, I don't know if I would have engaged in those debaucherous acts as much. I really don't think so. And I also think that I would have acted a different way myself. I also think that the women that I would get in contact with and be around would also have different standards for me. So that would change the way that I approach them, how I would act as a person to be able to track them. Whereas now it's just, hey, this guy looks okay, this guy's funny, this guy won a game of pool, this guy, has got beard oil in his beard and it smells nice. That's literally what's gotten me laid on many occasions, these little things. And I don't think that those women were thinking to themselves, I would have a child with this guy. I think that if any of those interactions ended up with a child, they probably would have had an abortion. Now, I'm not 100% certain on that, but that's where I'm going with this. So now you trickle that into the society thing. Okay, if a woman isn't just thinking about today, right now, pleasure, a guy's not thinking about that as well. She's thinking about the future. She's not thinking about herself anymore and what's going on with her body. She's thinking about what the future might hold for herself and her child. Same thing with a man. How would that dictate their decision making about whether it's their health, whether it's about their choices in school, whether it's their choices in a career, in the way that they interact with their community? People oftentimes, they have a lifestyle and they're out and they're young, or maybe not even that young, but they are focused in on themselves and their career and whatnot. And then they end up having kids. A lot of times what ends up happening, they end up moving. Why do they end up moving? Now you might say, well, there's a financial burden that comes along with a kid. Yes. But one of the biggest reasons why people end up moving is because they go, I can't live in this place and rear a kid. This place is crazy. They live in the city, or they live in a place that is not conducive to rearing a child. And so they want to move to another area that has better schools, that has safer streets. Why would you want that? Because you're like, well, I have to rear this child. And it's so why would you move? Because the place that you were living in wasn't as safe. It wasn't as good for the community. It was focused on yourself. And that's where you see the crime and you see these things. Would we, if we weren't focused in on ourselves so much, if we were thinking about the future with kids, would we make our cities safer? Would things be different? I don't know. I wasn't alive that long ago. I'm not that old. So I don't know what cities were like in the past. Now, again, this is also a new thing. We haven't had, it hasn't been that long since we've had major big cities like New York and LA. These things are relatively new in regard to the amount of people that are there. So there's lots of other changes that go into the degradation of society and crime and stuff like that. But I wanted to touch on the birth control because I think a lot of that comes down to how we interact with one another. If I'm thinking about the future versus if I'm thinking about just today and my pleasure today, oh, she looks cute, that would be fun for today, versus, hey, who is this person that I might end up rearing a child with? Who am I actually getting into a relationship with? So I think that changes things in society. This is, again, just my opinion. Now, you might say, devil's advocate, you go, hey, JD, well, that pill gives me more time and it gives me more chances for me to look at people and get to know them and be intimate with them and know if we're compatible so that by the time I do decide to settle down, I know I've made the right choice. I don't see that in society. I know that that is true for some cases, yes. But what I look at today, I look at over 50% divorce rate. I look at broken homes. I come from one. Okay, I look at the way that we interact with one another as very selfish, even in those relationships, even with children. I look at that selfishness as something that continues to go along. So maybe that's a problem that contraception can't solve. But like I was saying, maybe it contributes to it on some level where I am thinking about my future from a very young age, because once I go through puberty, I can have a baby now. I am able to produce that if I have sex. So maybe I'm not having sex as much. Maybe I'm not having sex at all because I don't want to take that risk. Maybe I'm interacting with people differently, like I said, because I want to not develop a relationship with someone and then be like, I have feelings for this person and I want to get intimate with them and then we want to have sex. Well, if I choose someone because of X, Y, and Z reasons that are selfish reasons, I'm physically attracted to them, all right? I just like the way that they make me feel, okay? They're popular, but I'm not thinking about, hey, is this person someone that I could spend the rest of my life with? Does this person have qualities that are good to rear a child with? If I'm making decisions on that, maybe I make better long-term decisions and maybe those relationships don't get broken up as much. I don't know if that's 100% true or not. I think there's always gray areas in this, but do you see where I'm going with this? I think that although I don't think it'll ever go away, I think the question is more about contraception and sex versus something like abortion. That's down the line. That's past, right, that point. But it's about relationships and it's about sex. How we approach those subjects will dictate what we end up on the back end, obviously. But I think on the front end, relationships, society, community, I think would benefit a lot more from not a sexless society. I think zero sex is not the answer. We've got to make babies. We've got to have relationships. But I think looking at that and looking at that question versus, like I said, the back end question of abortion, you might start to change other interactions along with it. Whereas if you just look at abortion, people who say, it's my body, my choice, all right, they might not have had an abortion, because everyone that I've talked to that's had an abortion, again, this is anecdotal, it's not a good experience for them. And so when you look at that, it's like, okay, you have this bad thing that's at the end. That's not a good solution to a problem. Try to get things on the front end. Try to get things before they turn into this weird decision about ending a life. What might happen if you are thinking about that life before you make the act of making a life, which is sex? So I think that interaction and the contraception thing might change other things in society as well. And that's really what I was talking about in this video. Again, the idea came from looking at abortion. We go back from that, sex, contraception. Why are you having that sex? Well, I can't get pregnant, so I'm going to have this sex. I'm going to have this pleasurable act with someone. Is that person someone that you really want to spend your life with, or did you just want to get laid? I think that if we were thinking more about our future, the way that we presented ourselves, the way that we made ourselves available for relationships, the way that we would interact with one another, whether that be at bars, how we would consume alcohol or drugs, would we keep ourselves in an inebriated state, knowing that we were going to end up maybe having sex because, hey, it feels good. We're not thinking on our same wavelength. And then all of a sudden you're in bed with someone that you don't even remember their name. I don't think those are good conditions for us to end up making babies. Now, maybe that is the best way. Maybe we wouldn't have a good society with it. But like I said, I look at our numbers today. I look at relationships and I look at the way things are going, and I don't see that that is good. I see that we are creating our own problems through our own selfishness. And I think that looking beyond yourself and beyond the future is the key to creating a good society. So that's really, if I was going to make a somewhat of a thesis behind it, I would say that the contraception prevents us from thinking about the future and thinking about other people on a grander scale. I think there's still capability of doing that, of course, right? Of course there is. But I would say it would be forcing you to on a daily basis. And sometimes we need to be forced to do things because left to our own devices, I know this better than anyone, left to our own devices, it doesn't end up going really well. Hey, you got what you wanted. Didn't really work out too well for you. It's kind of interesting when that happens. So anyways, that's it for today. Just wanted to talk about that. Until next time, I'll see you then.